Hello and welcome to Geography at the Garibaldi School, and this is going to be your second lesson on the changing UK economy. Last time round you looked at what is globalisation and how has it affected the UK economy, and hopefully you were able to complete the work and do these two exam questions. I'm going to give you some feedback now. Your teacher will give you some feedback in teams, but ultimately I'd like you to mark these as well. Question 2.7 is pretty easy. You've got a figure number, two pie charts, and it's asking you to describe the changes to the industrial structure shown in figure 7. It doesn't give you exact numbers, but what you can do is you know that in 2011 over 75% of jobs are in services. You know that in 1961 it was under 50%. That's where you get the mark. You must probably have a percentage in your answer, and to do that you've just got to work out what the percentage would be from that pie chart. I would expect you to talk about possibly services and increasing and manufacturing decreasing. For question 2.8, it says suggest the reasons for the changes shown. Well, it's 4 marks, so you probably need 2 points really well developed. And those points are all linked back to the work that you've done throughout last week's lesson. It's all to do with globalisation. You could have talked about cheaper labour in NEES, therefore manufacturing taking place in China or India. You could have talked about transnational corporations spreading the work around. You could have talked about having a higher educated workforce and therefore more people working in services and less manufacturing. The mark schemes are there for you to use. And again, I'll let you use this, and for 2.7 it's pretty straightforward. For 2.8, it's at least 2 AO1s and 2 AO2s, but like I say, double development always helps. And you've got yourself the bullet points underneath, what's called the indicative content. This is actually the points, the AO1 points they'd be looking for. Moving and manufacturing to other countries we spoke about, increasing wealth leading to the growth of services, growth of technology, that's that quaternary sector, you might have referred to that. Growth of particular sectors like tourism, transport, recreation. Mechanisation of primary and secondary activity is another key idea. Mechanisation means using more machines, and actually those machines replace humans as labour. So if you think about a factory that used to probably use a human workforce, now they've probably got machinery that can do the jobs, therefore humans are no longer needed. Give yourself a mark, and we'll move on to today's learning. Today's learning is all around that word, de-industrialisation. How have traditional industries declined in the UK? De-industrialisation. So we're going to know the reasons for the decline of traditional industry in the UK, and to understand how this has an impact and how the government has responded. And it's really important that you start to tie this learning up and you start to think about how this links back to what we've done previously. This was from last lesson, and you will have described this graph, but equally you will have explained how globalisation led to these changes. It's effectively the same as that 4-mark exam question you've just done. But we know that services have increased and manufacturing has decreased rapidly from around about 1961. Manufacturing declining, and along with primary sector declining, is de-industrialisation. The decline, D, of industry, industrialisation. Therefore, you can see that what you did last time out starts to link to what we're looking at this time. So de-industrialisation, the decline of industry. And when we say industry, we mean traditional industries, farming, mining, factory work, manufacturing, that kind of industry. So your starting task. Using figure 20.4, describe the changes in the number of coal mines in the UK since 1913. 2 marks. It could not get easier, folks. Pause the video, have a go. Okay, welcome back. And again, you should have started probably from around about 1913. You should have given a number for the amount of coal mines there were then. You should have talked about how it decreased until around 1990 when there was next to none, and then it's obviously been a lot slower, the decline from there. But you should have talked about it being a steady decline maybe, but certainly years and number of coal mines should be in your answer with the general trend. The trend is that it has declined. Now, what I've got for you next is a video about Britain's last coal mine closing, and I've got a news article which I'm going to ask you to open up and you to have a read. So I'll play you the video.
It's dirty, dark and 11 kilometres from fresh air. This is the last shift in the last of Britain's deep coal mines. The last lump of coal will go into a museum, but so will an entire tradition. 450 jobs will go, bonds of friendship forged over decades on the ground will persist.
Everybody knows we've got to decarbonise and go green, we know that, but we're not ready for it.
For these men, it's more than just a workplace. Mining has been a way of life. Kellingley opened in 1959 to tap massive reserves of coal for electricity.
The coal from Kellingley will flow like a black river for the rest of this century and beyond. A mine is born.
By 1984, when the miners' strike began, there were still 180,000 working in Britain's coal mines. Kellingley was a scene of fighting then, but after the strike's defeat, pit closures and privatisation reduced the industry to just a few working mines. Drax Power Station, just next door, will now burn cheaper foreign coal and has partly switched to wood chips to meet emissions targets. But this mine's coal is far from finished. The men who tried to buy the business are angry.
They've just shut pits upon pit after the strike. After the strike, that's what it will finish. There'll be next steel workers, there'll be next power stations, then we'll start with the car workers. They don't want us, they'd rather import stuff, won't they?
That's right then, departure lounge.
But they're losing more than jobs. Coal mining created social and political traditions that were once at the centre of the industrial way of life. As the last men from the last shift, from the last deep mine colliery leave this place for good, an entire industry and social tradition that shaped British democracy is over. As for redundancy money, it will be minimal, 13,000 for a 39-year career underground.
David Cameron's achieving what Margaret Thatcher set out to do in 1984. I try not to make it political, but, you know, there were a will here. The workforce themselves wanted to buy this mine, and there is a market down the road, 7 miles down the road, that will continue to burn that product. So why couldn't we continue? I'll let your viewers make that opinion, not myself.
For the men, that's their livelihood gone. But this is a massive and symbolic moment in the rise and decline of the carbon age.
Okay, so that's a really interesting video. A few key points it picks out is that is a mine that is closing down, de-industrialisation. It leads to some impacts. 450 jobs are going to be lost. One of the workers talked about, he understood it was a need to keep going green. We know that coal is a very dirty type of energy. But later in the video, it talked about the fact that coal was still being burnt at a power station 7 miles up the road. It was just cheaper to import that coal. In 1984, there was the miners' strikes, and there was 180,000 people employed in mining. That number's down to a handful now. Another one of the workers talked about it's the mines now. Then it will be car manufacturing. That's de-industrialisation. Then it'll be the power stations, de-industrialisation. So the shipbuilding, de-industrialisation. The news article that is attached to this slide, I'd like you to try and open it up. And I'm just going to try and open it up now. And what I'd like you to do with that news article is have a read, because it relates to yourself. You'll see that it is based on Nottinghamshire coal mining in Thoresby. Now in your booklet you've got space to find a bit more information out, because the majority of us, we live in that mining community. That's what Forest Town and Clipston were built on. It was built on the mine. We've still got the headstocks as a bit of the heritage that is from that area. I'd like you to read through this article. It just gives you a bit of information about Nottinghamshire. You used to have 42 collieries and 40,000 miners, one of the most successful coalfields in Europe, but it's all come to an end. Some of you, once you've read this article, and you can see it's not overly long, some of you will then be able to speak to hopefully maybe members of your family or parents who've got parents that used to work in the coal mines at Clipston, and find out what their views are on de-industrialisation. It's really useful living where we do for this question or this issue in geography, because it affects us directly. And if you think about going back possibly 30, 40 odd years, then at that point a significant amount of men in the area would have worked down the mines, and actually a lot of students at Garibaldi School would have gone on to work at the mines. Once they're closed, there needs to be an alternative. So once you've done all that work on the mines, and hopefully you find it interesting with it being in your local area, there's also other industries that have been affected by your deindustrialisation process. It says, how is this linked to your prior learning? Well, it's linked based on that graph that you've described, the decline of secondary industry. If you look at all of those industries there, shipbuilding up in Newcastle and Sunderland on the rivers Tyne and Wear, and the iron and steel industry, which was also used to support that shipbuilding, and chemicals, the chemical industry down near Middlesbrough. This is the northeast of England, and all of those industries have now declined. They've suffered. There's 3 more examples on top of coal mining there of deindustrialisation. You need to summarise what this is showing in your booklet. As with everything in geography, where something happens, there are impacts. There are social impacts, economic impacts, and environmental impacts. We've been doing this all the way through year 7. Social impacts could include alcoholism, increased levels of crime, family breakdowns, high unemployment. Economic is loss of income, loss of government for the tax for the government. Remember, if you don't pay tax in an area, there's not as much investment going to happen. What's going to happen to your local area? It's probably going to start to get worse. Rising demand for support, migration, those with degrees and things, they leave the area. And if you haven't got money, you're not earning, you're not going to go spend your money in a shop. Remember, we've talked about the positive multiplier effect before. Well, things like high unemployment can lead to the negative multiplier effect. Environmental issues, well, there's the one positive possibly, in that there's no more CO2 being emitted into the atmosphere, and noise and air pollution is probably reduced, and there's less water usage, but it does leave something called a brownfield site. A brownfield site is contaminated land that used to be used for industry, and you have all seen it, I guarantee, because you've all seen the land where the headstocks is. It's land that used to be used for coal mining. It's not used now, but it is polluted, and if anyone's going to use that again, they're going to have to clean it up before that's possible. So your next task is just to complete this cycle of decline. Market declines. That means there's less of a demand for something. In this case, you could think coal. Therefore, industries close. Then I've left a blank, and I want you to find out which of those 4 statements at the bottom should go there. Then, less money spent in shops and services. Then there's 2 blanks. Then poor image puts off new investors. Then there's another blank. And it goes back to the industry's close. It's called the cycle of decline because it keeps happening. And unless you stop it, decline will continue to happen in your local area. Complete your cycle of decline in your booklet. So hopefully you're now back at the objective slide. Hopefully now you know a number of things. 1, deindustrialisation, what it is, and some examples. Secondly, the reasons why these industries have declined in the UK. You've got a case study on your doorstep of coal. The impacts, so what are the impacts of this decline? And how the government has responded is a tricky one, and we'll look at that next time out. As ever with everything in geography, if you've got any questions, feel free to get in touch with your teacher. If you have a bit of extra time and you want to start making revision resources, then please feel free. It's a really good idea. But until next time, it's Mr. Brennan saying work hard and take care. Bye bye.